Okay, so hello everyone. I hope you're keeping safe and well. I'm Louise Jacobson, the managing partner of Brazen, MENA, and I'd like to thank you all and welcome you all to this afternoon's webinar, which is going to be all about mindfulness, which is going to be led by the amazing Kirsty Heaton, who is a teacher, guru, coach about all things mindfulness. So I really hope you enjoy it. We want the session to be as useful to you as possible. So if you have any questions about any of the content we put on here today, please feel free to ask a question via the chat box, which I hope you can all see at the bottom of the screen. And we will have time at the end to answer any questions. Because the subject of mindfulness is to do with well-being and it touches a little bit into mental health, if you don't feel comfortable in asking a question in a public forum, please don't worry, that's not a problem. You can email Kirsty after the session and she will respond back to you. Or similarly, if there's anything PR-wise you want to know or how mindfulness and PR works, you can email me as well. I'm just going to start off by doing a quick scene setter to give some context of why I feel mindfulness is relevant and important to us as communications professionals. I had the pleasure of working with Kirsty about a year ago, and since then I find mindfulness has been a real help professionally and personally. So last year, Brazen MENA, I decided to include a well-being policy for my team. So this meant that it was an official policy that we'd have certain practices, certain mandates in place related to mental health and well-being. Why did I do this? Well, when I first started my career in PR a long time ago now, about 2001, 2002, the PR industry was hugely different. The world was completely different. There was no social media. There was no 24-hour news cycle. We sent things out in a machine some of you may have heard of. It's an antique these days called a fax. That's how we used to send our press releases out back in the day. But for me, most importantly, there was no smartphones. And of course, these advancements that we have now with social media and with WhatsApp and all these fantastic communications apps is that it gives us so much opportunity as professionals and as human beings in our personal lives. And the fact we're on lockdown now in COVID-19, having Zoom, calls with our family and our colleagues is just fantastic. So it's really an amazing thing. But on the flip side, I feel that we're constantly bombarded with notifications, WhatsApp, social media, and it's constantly evolving and growing and just getting bigger. Arianna Huffington said at the World Government Summit here in Dubai last year that addiction to smartphone or attachments to smartphones is going to lead to a worldwide burnout. And she's got a really good point. And I think it's something that needs to be addressed, especially for us as communications professionals, because it's our job to communicate. It's our job to have to know about all these platforms, be constantly connected, especially if you work in agency side and you're looking after social media for your clients. It's a lot, and I find myself bombarded and I find myself overwhelmed and stressed out with just the influx of things of communication that you have to deal with. So if I find myself bombarded and I'm a little bit older and experienced than my team say, then I feel that it's my responsibility as a business leader to try and put things in place to really help the team not feel as overwhelmed, so we feel as happy and as motivated as possible. And I'm sure you agree, there are some times you want to throw your mobile phone out the window. I know I certainly do. We've also now got COVID-19, another layer of stress, another layer of anxiety for us all. We're in an economic uncertainty. Job security has been, an issue for lots of different people across the world, not just in communications. We've got movement restrictions. We're on lockdown, and I think Brazen's on like week 6 or week 7 now. So I've lost count. And this is another thing. The days just blend into one. There's no routine. And for me, the most challenging thing actually is that my home space is now my workspace, and I'm personally really, struggling with having to find the way to separate the two. So there's lots of different challenges on top of what I feel is already quite a stressful industry. So anyway, dialing back to 2018 when I was putting the wellbeing policy in place for my team, I was looking for techniques that could help us cope in everyday situations. And what I mean by that is strategies that can just be deployed in the working day. Unfortunately, 3-hour breaks aren't possible. Having a lie down, going for a lie down of an afternoon isn't possible, although maybe now in COVID-19, not that I advocate it or anything. None of these things are practical. So one of the techniques I came across was mindfulness. And it's actually used by a lot of Fortune 500 companies, including Google, Apple, and Nike. And as I mentioned before, I've been practicing mindfulness for about a year since I met Kirsty, and it's really helped me manage my stress professionally. So I'm coming into work more motivated, more positive, feeling like I'm able to handle things. It's also helped my personal life as well, that I'm more in the moment with what I'm doing. It's helping me, it becoming more enjoyable, I guess. And I think really during this very strange time that we're all in, I think now more than ever, we need to find things just to really help us try and keep motivated, keep our sanity, and keep us as happy as possible. So anyway, I'm going to be quiet now and hand you over to the lovely Kirsty. So I really hope that you find this session useful. Please go into it with an open mind, and any questions, please let us know at the end. Thank you.
Thank you, Louise. What a beautiful introduction. Thank you so much for that. I'd love this to be different. I'd love us to be all sat together and being able to see each other online and be able to see each other in a room all together, as I would usually teach mindfulness. But of course, we're under lockdown. We're keeping ourselves safe. So first of all, from me to you, I would like to wish you all well for you and your families, and move swiftly on into the mindfulness presentation I've prepared for you today. Maybe just a little bit of background about myself before we start. I've met possibly some of you last year when I met Louise also at one of the events. My name is Kirsty Heaton. I've lived in the UAE now for, we're close to 34 years now. Spent most of my life here. I'm originally from the UK, so I split my time between here and there, but mostly here. I raised my children here, so I have 2 Emirati children. My son is turning 20 next week in isolation, so that will be interesting. And my daughter's just turned 17. I came to mindfulness actually at a very challenging time in my own life. I was very ill about a decade ago. And mindfulness practice was introduced to me as a way of dealing with some of the challenges that I had around my illness. I actually really fell in love with mindfulness. I live it mindfully every day as much as I can. And my biggest passion is to teach it to others, hence why I'm here today. I work for Mindful Me, so everything we do is based around mindful practices. So I teach meditation. I also teach, most recently, qualified as a sound therapist. So I use a lot of sound bowl therapy with clients. So we're going to today have a quick look at mindfulness, give you a little background about it for those of you who may not know about it. We're going to do some mindfulness exercises during the next 45 minutes to an hour, so please join in. I know I can't see you, but please take a moment to follow on and join in. It might be useful for you to have a pen and paper, or just keep in mind some questions that you may have. We're going to have a question and answer session at the end, and I'll do my very best to answer any of the questions that you have. Nothing's off limits. You can ask anything. No judgment. We can just go ahead. Please, I'd ask everyone just to stay on mute. It's really helpful when we've got a big group. So let's get started. So this is one of my very favorite quotes, and the one that was sent out, I believe, with the invitation today. "You can't stop the waves, but you can learn to surf," by John Kabat-Zinn. And it's really true. Probably now, today, more than ever, with everything that's going on around the world, all the uncertainty, we need a good surfboard to be able to surf the waves of change. There's a lot of unchange, there's a lot of uncertainty going on. There's a lot of fear, is what I'm seeing mostly with private clients that I see, and just the general feeling around the world. We don't have to fall into all of these negative or difficult circumstances. If we can use mindfulness practice, that we can actually learn to surf the waves. Waves are always coming and going. We are like the ocean. Our lives are made up of multiple waves. Some of them can be tsunami style, and some of them are just little ripples on the ocean. What I have found is that mindfulness allows us to find a place of stillness. So we don't need to drop into the waves crashing on the shore, but we can actually find a way to help ourselves ride these waves, and just to have a sense of peace and centeredness within us as things are always changing, which we're experiencing far more at the moment in the present time. So I'll do a few little descriptions of what mindfulness is. So mindfulness is the practice of being present in the moment. You will learn to respond rather than have reactions and reacting. It's a way of being able to see our thoughts. Mindfulness is the practice of putting your mind where your body is. So really bringing the two together. What we know nowadays, and Louise it's very true, that in the older days, and I laughed when Louise mentioned about faxing. Yes, fax was a thing for those of you who don't remember, but nowadays we're so connected, which I understand, especially in your industry, is so important. But at the same time, it doesn't allow a lot of space. We're going to talk quite a little bit about space today and how we can create that space. You may also hear mindfulness described in other ways: presence, having awareness, being awake, living in the now. So there's lots of different ways that you may hear mindfulness described. It has its traditional roots in Buddhism. So mindfulness has roots over 2,000 years ago. The Buddhists would practice mindfulness. However, nowadays, and definitely the way we teach at Mindful Me, we focus on non-faith-based teaching, so it's available for everyone. And that certainly is how mindfulness has come across recently and most recent times. So just a little note, take a nice deep breath in now. In mindfulness practice, we always breathe in through our nose and out through our nose, and just center yourself wherever you find yourself today. In your homes, I'm sure for most of you. Just ask yourself this question. You can write it down. Just notice, what percentage of me is present right now? Don't overthink it. Just have that percentage with you. And I'll probably ask you about it a little bit later on towards the end of the presentation. So a little bit of evidence around mindfulness and a bit of the science for those of you who like science. There is evidence that mindfulness practices have a broad spectrum effect against depression and anxiety, and can also decrease general psychological distress. There's been lots of studies over mindfulness. Oxford University in the UK has one of the largest mindfulness universities, as does Wales in England, and very much so across the waters in the USA. There's a lot of studies being done around mindfulness. Schools in the UK now use mindfulness, so it is taught as a subject in most schools. Here in the UAE, and many schools practice mindfulness either at the beginning or middle of the day, because we found with children, especially with children at the moment, that mindfulness is a really good way of being able to handle difficult or challenging emotions as we're growing up. The Metropolitan Police Force in the UK use mindfulness practice. So if you're going to go out on the streets and be a policeman, you will have to have done an 8-week mindfulness course before you finish your training. Hospitals and mental health organizations use mindfulness, and actually a lot of doctors now prescribe mindfulness for people who are struggling maybe with some anxiety, a little bit of depression. They will actually prescribe mindfulness for people because of the good effects that we've noticed that it has. So here's another of my favorite quotes, and this is also by Jon Kabat-Zinn. Mindfulness means paying attention in a particular way, on purpose and in the present moment, without judgment. So Jon Kabat-Zinn is really the Westerner who brought, he's an American gentleman, he brought mindfulness to the West. He spent many years living in a meditation center in Tibet and Nepal. And he studied very much about mindfulness and the way of meditation. He is a clinical psychologist and he's a doctor. So what he did when he returned to the States in the late 1970s was use mindfulness practice on people who were suffering with very extreme pain disorders. He took many, sorry, I was going to say clients, but they definitely weren't clients, many patients in the hospital, and actually did a study on them over an 8-week period using mindfulness practice daily. And what he found was that being able to introduce them to mindfulness, they were able to reduce the medication that they were taking. Many of them had a much higher quality of life when they practiced mindfulness. We don't teach it in 8 weeks. Dubai is very transient and very busy, even now under lockdown. We teach it in a much smaller program and a much shorter program, but we have the same elements of mindfulness. But the MBSR program, which Jon Kabat-Zinn developed, is something that you might have heard about if you have an awareness of mindfulness. So if you Google mindfulness or have a look on the internet and say, oh, I want to find out what all this is about, this is the picture you'll probably find. This is the one that comes up most often. So mindful or mindful? I teach a lot of children mindfulness, and they always laugh when I bring this slide and they say, oh, now she's going to teach us to become like a dog. Definitely not. What we do know is, and for those of you who are dog owners, actually animals function below thinking, so which is beautiful, which is why they're always so excited to see us. Even if we've just gone out to throw the rubbish and come back in, their tails will be wagging, their eyes will be happy, because they only live in the moment. The person on the left of my screen, possibly the right of yours, is just totally absorbed in what's going on in their head. Rather than being here in the present moment, they find themselves lost in thinking. Lost in thinking and lost in anxiety seems to be very common for many of us nowadays, and especially more so now. But it takes away the joy of living. Mindfulness is going to teach us not to be able to function like the dog in the picture, but to be able to go above the thinking mind, to be able to choose our thoughts. We're able to do that through mindfulness practice. So, starting very early on, let's have a mindfulness practice right now while we're sitting here and getting comfortable. So whenever you see the dog, and there's kind of a theme in most of my presentations, there's always a dog in the presentation, just this is an indication that we're going to stop and do our first mindfulness practice. So I want you all, wherever you're sitting right now, just to try and sit yourselves up nice and tall. If you're laid back on the sofa or in an armchair, just sit your spine up nice and tall. See if you can roll your shoulders back. Just be aware of what's going on in your body. So the shoulders, the neck can be somewhere where we hold a lot of tension. So gently roll your shoulders up and back. And as you do that, what you'll notice is your chest immediately feels wider. We're actually creating space to be able to breathe better. You can rest your hands on the tops of your legs, either up or down, palms up or down, it doesn't matter which way. And just maybe very gently turn your neck from side to side. Please don't overextend the neck. It's somewhere, again, where we can have lots of injuries. And dropping your head down now, you can feel a lovely stretch up the back of your spine. And just bringing your head to neutral. And I'll ask you very gently to close your eyes. So as I mentioned earlier, in mindfulness practice, we breathe in through the nose and out through the nose. So I'll just ask you now to fall into the rhythm of your normal breathing. Our breath is very individual and it's very personal for ourselves. Never need to force the breath. Your body knows exactly how to breathe. So just fall into the rhythm of your own breath and bring your full focused attention to the very tip of your nose. You will experience the breath going in. You may feel cool. And as you exhale, you may feel a slight warmth. Maybe have an awareness as your chest rises and falls during this little mindfulness practice. Can you bring your attention to your feet? Are they firmly on the floor, keeping you in contact with the ground? What about the palms of your hands? They may feel warm. They may feel tingly, which is the energy that's running through. Often we don't take time to notice these things. So use this minute just to become really aware of what's going on within your body. When you feel very ready, you can gently open your eyes. Maybe just think of a word right now that would describe that experience for you. Maybe jot it down on your piece of paper and we can talk about it later on at the end. So our thoughts. We think approximately 60,000 thoughts a day, according to a study from Harvard University. 90% of our thoughts are the same as yesterday, which is quite shocking, and 80% are negative, mostly actually negative against ourselves. That means we have around 45,000 negative thoughts a day. So anyone who tells you that you choose your thoughts, I would kind of question that. Thinking happens to us. It's something that automatically happens. But mindfulness practice teaches us this. We can make a space between the thinking that happens to us and the thinking that we choose to attach to. You can even look at it as clouds passing by. Imagine your thoughts as clouds. Some of those clouds will be really useful. They bring rain, creativity, ideas. They bring compassion for others. They bring a sense of calm and love. Other thoughts are not so helpful. The ones that are painful, maybe towards us, they're kind of the thoughts that we have when we're driving, when we get back to driving our cars, and we may have taken a different turn and said, oh, I'll go this way down Sheikh Zayed Road instead of taking the usual route. And we end up in piles of traffic. And it's those little thoughts that say, oh, Kirsty, you're so stupid. Why did you take this road? You should have just kept on the same road where we were going. Those thoughts aren't useful to us. They hurt us. So try and have a think about all the thoughts that go around in your head and how mindfulness can actually bring a really good piece of space. Mindfulness practice teaches us this, probably above anything else, that I am not my thoughts. I am the person who thinks them. I'm not my feelings. I'm the person who experiences them. And I'm not my behavior. I'm the person who chooses to act or not. So it really shows us that I'm not my thinking mind. And I have the sense that in times like this, when our mind can be so full of thoughts of when will this end? When will things go back to normal? How will normal look? What about the jobs? What's happening with the economy? How am I going to manage all these thoughts that fill our mind? To be able to respond well and to not let us get bogged down by the thinking mind, we need to create space. It's in space that we can find clarity. Viktor Frankl, again, and he's probably one of my favorites to use for mindfulness teaching, he says this. He wrote a brilliant book called Man's Search for Meaning. I'll leave that in the comments section at the end. And he wrote this: between the stimulus and the response, there is a space. In that space is our power to choose our response. In our response lies our growth and freedom. If I had time today, I'd tell you a little bit of the story of Viktor Frankl, but I don't want to go into it too much. However, the conditions that he lived in and he experienced to actually be able to write this, he was in a concentration camp during Second World War. And he was able to see the people who managed to survive during those times were people who were able to really come back to themselves, take a space and respond rather than having a reaction. That's quite a dramatic and painful situation to be in, of course, but we can actually apply it to anything. So the stimulus could be anything: a painful thought, a conversation you're having at work with somebody, something to do with a loved one, someone cutting you off on the road. I like to use the road quite often when I speak about mindfulness here. But that is the stimulus. If we want a response, we need to have a space. Mindfulness practice is the space. It's even one deep breath. One deep breath allows us that piece of time to be able to access something quite different, a response. There is such a big difference between a response and a reaction. A reaction is unconscious. A reaction comes off our emotions. A reaction, you know you've reacted because it's usually afterwards you go, I wish I hadn't said that, or I wish I could take that back, or I wish I put it a different way, or why did I cause myself so much anguish and pain when I can't, this is out of my control. A response is something really quite different. Mindfulness allows us to find the ability to make a space and have a response. It's the only thing that brings growth and freedom. There is no growth in reaction. And Viktor Frankl very beautifully said this: everything can be taken from a man but one thing, the last of the human freedoms, to choose one's attitude in any given set of circumstances, to choose one's own way. It's true. If he could say it in such challenging times as what he was experiencing, we can apply this today. We have a choice to have a different attitude about what's going on right now. No matter, some people are enjoying this lockdown, by the way. I don't want to generalize and say everyone's struggling or suffering, but in every situation there's challenges. If we can bring a better attitude to those circumstances, it's kinder for us. Circumstances to choose our own way. Nobody can take that from us, and I think there is growth and freedom just in that statement. So we know from mindfulness practice, and Geshe Gatsu talks about this beautifully, when the turbulence of distracting thoughts subside and our mind becomes still, a deep sense of happiness and contentment naturally arises from within. That can be quite shocking for some people to read and to understand, but our essence is this. There is contentment, there is happiness, there is joy and clarity. There's all the things you need to be creative. I would imagine that's something you need a lot in your positions that you hold in your jobs. All of that comes from a place of stillness, not a place of striving and struggle. As soon as we apply strive and struggle, we apply a sense of urgency, and there is no space anymore. We can be so productive by having space. Everything we need, we will find if we practice this and we practice mindfulness. Everything we need is inside us. We don't need to search for it from outside. We have all the answers within. So why do we escape the present moment? Fear, the psychological condition of fear, is really what happens to most people. And I think more so nowadays that we experience this feeling of fear, of something that might happen, not that what is happening right now. So there's a big difference. Our minds want to go into what's happening in the future, because we don't have the tools to deal with the emotions and feelings that are happening for us right now. That's true for a lot of people. We haven't grown up with parents, or maybe even in our culture or our society, where we understand emotions and feelings. For a lot of people, especially culturally, it's something that isn't expressed, or there's a certain kind of taboo about expressing emotions and feelings, or our parents kind of just avoided the situation because they themselves didn't know. Because the past gives you an identity and the future holds the promise of hope. It's so true. But as soon as we've done that, we've left the present moment. Why do we do that? What's happening to us is something called the fight, flight, or freeze response. The fight, flight, or freeze is actually an inbuilt response that's a very small part of the brain called the amygdala. It's as if it's your thumb. It sits inside the brain, and the rest of your brain tissue is held over the top. This little guy has a huge responsibility. He's actually keeping us safe. That was great, and it was really useful in times, or even times now, when we need to be safe. Crossing the road, for instance, and there's a car coming around the corner. What happens? You see it, you feel afraid. Your whole body goes into fight, flight, or freeze response. So hopefully you would run to the other side of the road. You'd feel a lot of adrenaline in your body, the heart pumping faster, lots of blood circulating in your body to get you out of and into safety. Once you reach there and you were safe, you'd be able to relax again. Because of external circumstances that are happening at the moment, a lot of people are firing their fight, flight, or freeze response. Is kind of what we call an overdrive. So they're really living on that response all the time, rather than having peaks of, this is an emergency and I need to be able to be safe. They're actually staying on that for a very long period of time, and it makes us tired. It makes us snappy, and we don't find the space for a response, where a lot of us are reacting at that moment. It also isn't good for our immune system, and we are looking right now more than ever to keep ourselves healthy, to maintain a good immune system. But more than anything, it's our friend. When we know and we're not afraid of the system that we have in place, and we can look and say, wow, this is amazing, this is a miracle, but I want to be able to use it only when I really need it. And for the rest of the time, I can find ways through mindfulness practice and breathing that I can come back and calm my nervous system down. It's so much more useful and so much kinder for us to live in this way. For most of us, what we're doing right now more than ever is time traveling. And I would imagine, if I could ask you to raise your hands and then see you all, if you were in a room in front of me, I'd say, where are you now? Are you living more in the past, remembering how things used to be? Or are you in the future, stressing, worrying, anxietying, we call it nowadays? The what ifs. There is no peace there. We are only ever here now. As one of the great mindfulness and presence teachers taught us, Eckhart Tolle wrote a brilliant book called The Power of Now, and A New Earth. He speaks about only being here in the present moment. Your whole life is made up of this moment. We never actually have the future. We can plan and put plans in place, and I would imagine in your work, as well as many of the corporations that I speak to, planning and preparing is part of your job. I'm not saying not to do that. Go ahead and plan, but let go of the anxiety and the worry that comes with it. Do everything that you can in this moment to prepare for later on, but let go of the anxiety and worry. It's kinder for you. You don't have any control over the future. We just have what's in our hands today, right now. Some of the things that will be really useful, I think, during this session is to look at how we can practice self-care. When we know that acts of self-care are so important for us now, not only coming back to my breathing, how else can I take care of myself during these times? How can I nurture myself? How can I find that space? So we can ask ourselves, sometimes through journaling, even just sitting quietly, having a notebook next to you, what is it I most need? So maybe write this down while we're together today. What would be most useful for me right now? How can I give that to myself? So for a lot of people, it may be connection. I understand for people who are isolated and maybe staying alone at home at the moment, there's a sense of loneliness. It's okay to feel these feelings. Mindfulness teaches us there's never positive and negative feelings. They are all just what I'm experiencing now. If loneliness is something you're experiencing, how can I help myself? Could I reach out? We're so fortunate now that we have Zoom and other platforms, WhatsApp, calling, different packages that we can use. Call and reach out to somebody and say, hey, you know, I actually just need to make a connection right now. Maybe it's the opposite. For some of us who are living with families at home and we're confined, maybe we need a bit of space. I wonder how we could say that nicely to our loved ones, that I actually just need to take a little bit of space. Maybe it's looking at sleep. Sleep is so important for us, especially now. It heals the amygdala. It heals our responses in our body as well. It's really important to have good sleep to build up our immune system. Can I look at what I'm eating? I know I seem to see a lot on social media that everyone's baking and cooking right now, which is lovely, but are there ways that I can nurture myself and find compassion in that? What would it bring me? Having a self-care, what would this bring for me? So these are all questions that you can ask in a moment when you feel quiet. Maybe you've had a mindfulness practice, even just sitting quietly with yourself for 5 minutes each day. You can really look and ask yourself, what do I need? We can never access what we need when we're totally full up. It's like trying to find space in a bowl that's already full. We want to make some space in there. So a space inside us, which would be here, you can see on my chest area. This is the space we need to access, as well as the mind. So we believe in mindfulness practice that the body and mind are connected. So you'll have space in your mind and space in your body at the same time. It's so important. More than anything, and I love this slide, we're in this together. And I think more than anything at the moment, to reassure people, sometimes when we feel a sense of overwhelm, the kindest thing at the moment to do is say, you know what? Everyone's in the same boat. Everybody. We may not struggle with the same things, but we're definitely in the same boat with this. Being able to do that allows us to develop self-compassion, which for me as a mindfulness teacher, and I teach mindfulness from a place of self-compassion, it's so important to have that element. That element allows us to connect to ourselves, which is so important right now. And it also allows us to connect to others. We may come across colleagues or friends who are struggling, and very often we want to fix somebody. We want to say, I know exactly what you need to do. You need to do this. But the kindest thing for a lot of people at this present moment, more than ever, is to be able just to say, you're struggling. Yeah, me too. Just saying me too can bring an element of empathy and compassion for somebody else. Our common humanity right now is there is struggles. There is lots of unknown, uncertainty, change. Lots of different things are happening right now. I know a lot of families are struggling because they're homeschooling. All of a sudden they've become teachers and having to help children at home, as well as practice their own job and get used to online learning and online systems that we haven't been used to before. There's our inability to connect with others. So there's all different ways that we may find this situation a struggle. But there's also, if we can practice mindfulness in those moments, I truly believe that we also have so many opportunities to grow, to connect, to know ourselves better. There's no better time to be able to know yourself better than when you're actually isolated with yourself. In those moments, it could be challenging for you. So reach out to a professional or somebody maybe from your organization, or somebody who's a professional who can help you to go through those struggles. Often when we make a space inside us, things come up, maybe things from our childhood or things that we struggle with, maybe parts of anxiety that feel overwhelming for us. That's really normal right now. What I want to say probably more than anything is everything that you're experiencing right now is completely normal. But reach out if you do need some help. Viktor Frankl said, and another lovely quote that I love this, the meaning of your life is to help others find meaning in theirs. And I think more than anything right now, it's true. If we can find the meaning in our own life, and that's something that you can sit with over these coming weeks or however long that we're in this situation, and really look at what is the meaning of my life? What is it that I can do? If I know what I can do for myself, I also know what I can do to help others find meaning in theirs. And I truly believe there's no greater purpose in life. We can do that in our jobs. We don't have to become a guru or sit on a mountaintop or hide in a cave. We can do this through any job that we do together when we're working with others. So I'd like to finish my part of the presentation with a little mindfulness practice. I will read the mindfulness practice for you. It's a beautiful one called Finding Self-Compassion and Loving Kindness practice. So I'd invite you all just to sit very comfortably. You can gently close your eyes and just listen to me as I go through this little practice with you, and maybe have an awareness of the words that I'm saying. At the end of the practice, you'll hear a gong before we move on, and you can gently open your eyes. So just dropping your shoulders, closing your eyes. I'm going to invite you to put one of your hands onto your chest area. And just take a moment to feel the warmth of your hand against your chest. We have really important neurons around our heart center and in our chest. And when we make contact with those with our own hand, it actually sends a calming signal to the amygdala. And we find a sense of peace and calm just by doing this. So I'd encourage you just to fall into the rhythm of your natural breathing. As I mentioned before, it's individual for everybody. Gently breathing in and out through your nose. Having a sense of space in your chest. Having a sense of connection to your hand. It's probably feeling quite warm now, your hand against your chest. Some of you may be able to feel your own heart beating. In the loving kindness meditation, direct these words to yourself. May I be happy. May I be safe. May I be healthy. May I live in peace. May all beings be happy. May all beings be safe. May all beings be healthy. May we all live in peace. May there be peace on earth. May the hearts of all people be open to themselves and each other. May all people awaken to the light of their own true nature. May all creation be blessed and be a blessing to all that is. Just stay with your breath. And when you feel ready, just taking a nice deep breath in, you can gently open your eyes. We've talked quite a bit about communication, so I like to, at the end of the session, always advise on a couple of apps that will be useful for you maybe to support your practice. You don't need to do this alone, and it can be quite hard in the beginning to get started, but Calm app is a wonderful app that you can download onto your phone. You don't need to buy the membership. There is a membership, but you don't need to buy it. Everything that you need and is available for you is free. It's enough. There's a lovely part of the Calm app called the breathing exercises on the right. It's just literally a breathing bubble. So if you're really feeling anxious, sit with your hand on your chest and do the breathing bubble. It will bring you back to the present moment. And I believe it's just a couple of minutes. Insight Timer is another one that I really like. There's hundreds of thousands of different people doing meditations. Story time at night. If you're struggling to fall asleep at night, listen to somebody else read you a story. It's not just for little ones, it's for us too. Insight Time is really brilliant. Be part of our community. So Mindful Me and my colleagues who I work with, we're always posting on social media on our main webpage. So through Facebook and Instagram, we post reminders every day. So there could be a breathing exercise. There could be a piece of mindfulness that will help you just reconnect with yourself. Everything from walking the dog, which we can't do at the moment, but maybe up and down at home, to changing your bed or just washing the pots, preparing a cup of tea. We're always posting little quotes that might be encouraging for you. Try and distance yourself from watching the news. We need to keep informed. It's true. We don't need to watch the news every hour on the hour, and especially the hour before we go to bed in the evening. It's really good to go to bed with holding something more dear in our hearts than what's on the news. We know no news, good news makes it to the news, especially at 10 o'clock. So try and just make a distance for yourself, first thing in the morning and last thing at night. More than anything, I wish you all well and to keep safe during these times. And we'd like to, I feel, maybe pass back to Louise or open for questions if anybody has anything that I may be able to help with and you'd be happy for me to share the answer. Please go ahead.
Thank you so much, Kirsty. That was absolutely wonderful. And having used your techniques for the past year, I just want to pass on a couple of the things that I've done that have really helped me as a PR person, as an individual wanting to grow and learn more. The first is reacting, not responding. That was a huge challenge for me. I'm naturally quite a fiery person, a passionate person, but with that comes a little bit of fire. And you said earlier on that, you know, you say things and you're like, oh no, I shouldn't have said that. That is me to a T. But I've really worked on myself just to kind of pause, create that space, and not react. So that's one thing I found professionally and personally really, really helpful. And the second thing is this notion of time traveling. So I was someone that was, you know, I'll be sitting having lunch, I'll be on my phone thinking of the things I have to do in an hour's time. And you're on autopilot. You're not stopping to enjoy the moment that you're in. You're stressing from a client email or something that's happened, and you're thinking 10 steps ahead in a negative way. So just to try and remind yourself, you can't obviously predict the future. You have an idea, yes, of what's going to happen, but you can't control it. So try not to let that worry you too much. So those, for me, as a PR person, were the two biggest things that I've learned. And it's an ongoing learning process. But I'll say that I'm a lot better than I was 12 months ago, that's for sure. So we've had a couple of questions. The first one I think is for you, Kirsty. How do you tell your loved ones that you need space?
That's a lovely question. No, and I need something can be said in such a beautiful way. So I always encourage people to start with a feeling of love with the other person. So just an understanding, and I really, it's about making connection. I think in a short way of answering that, make connection first and just say, you know, this really feels something that I need right now. I love you and your time, and I respect that, but I need this. I wonder if how can we work this out together? So if you're in a small space, maybe with a family or a loved one, your husband, your wife, have a conversation about it. Look at a routine. Look at ways that each of you can have a piece of quiet time. You know, you can say you need it, and say, I love you too, and I'd like to give you that time. How can we work around this? So really just look at it, rather than, we often, when we need something for ourselves because we don't have much space, we come at it in a way that can be a little bit aggressive or short-tempered or reacting, as we talked about before. And if we just really take a moment and say, you know, this is what I need right now, this will be so helpful for me. I would imagine maybe you need that too sometimes. How could we work this out together? Open up the conversation more.
Thank you, Kirsty. The next question, as we mentioned, the days are merging into one. That is absolutely correct. They're also going really quickly. Again, very true. Glance at your clock and realize it's 2 p.m. You haven't had a break. What mindful tips would you recommend for breaking the day up in the house? And that's to both of us. I'll just start. Well, for me, I try to have a routine. Yeah. So I start the morning off with an exercise routine that I do. It's just half an hour every day because I obviously can't get to the gym. I then do some meditation and manifestations. So I have a little kind of 10, 15 minutes to myself just to center myself ready for the working day. I then use kind of my lounge kitchen areas like the work hub, do my morning work. I then have a break. So that's cooking lunch, sit on the terrace, do the afternoon work. And in the evenings, I try and not sit in the lounge kitchen area. because like many of you, I suppose they're in apartments, there's not a lot of room. So I'm trying just to use the spaces in my apartment. Lucky I've got a nice terrace, just to try and break that up so I'm not feeling like work is always there. As I mentioned before, that's the most challenging thing for me. Then at the weekend, I'm trying not to do much work, if at all possible, and doing things I enjoy. So that's music, I'm learning how to DJ, watching films and reading books. So that's how I kind of try and break things up so it doesn't feel overwhelming.
Yeah, I agree with Louise. And these times, having a routine, our bodies actually like routine, and to stick to some kind of routine during the working week, I have a sense is really important. It gives you meaning, it gives you a function for the day. So look at starting the day with a morning routine. How we start the day is so important. Don't pick up your phones first thing in the morning and scroll through social media. Have a routine. So Louise does some exercise, so a bit of meditation, have some quiet time. For a lot of people, they like to journal. Start the day off by making a little list. Can you have a connection? Make yourself a good breakfast, something nice that you enjoy. Spend a little bit of time on the balcony. If you don't have access to a garden, open the door, sit on the balcony. It's really small things throughout the day. You can use, actually, going back to the phone, you can use the phone to put a little alarm on. So for those of you who could hear my gong, you can actually have the Insight timer has those that you can program in and put like every hour or so. Make it a point to stand up, move around, take a breath, make a cup of tea, just split up those times. Definitely have a working routine. Now, most of us are working from home. When that time comes in the evening, say to yourself, okay, this is the end of my day now. If you're able to move away from the working zone, and like Louise was saying, just keep that for working and move into a different part of the house and really transition yourself, maybe change as well, change your clothes, move into something more comfortable and cozy. I know for a lot of people they're spending their whole day in the pajamas, but I think to have the routine really, really does help us. Something structured towards the evening is so important for sleep. Come off social media. Give yourself time. Can I have a hot shower or a bath? Can I watch something light-hearted, something a little bit more uplifting? Read. Do a puzzle. We've been doing a puzzle as a family. I bought 2,000 pieces, so we're going at it hard. But little things that you maybe haven't had time to do before. Write, journal. There's so many opportunities. Listen to a piece of music. I think that's one of my favorites.
And I think you've touched on most of those things there, Kirsty, but are there any further mindfulness tips which work well in the evening to help switch off?
I mean, for me personally, I like candles. I love candles. I just like that transition to making a hot drink, lighting some candles, reading something in the evening. Before I actually fall asleep, I love to do something called a body scan. Because I've been left with a health condition, that means at the end of the day, I can have quite a lot of physical pain. For me, it helps so much. So when I go to bed, I do a body scan. You can access it from Insight Timer, from the Calm app, put it on. There's lots of different people who read, and they will read through for you. And your phone will just go off automatically at the end. It's a lovely way to fall asleep.
Brilliant. I'll definitely be trying that one. The next question, how can we encourage our employers and managers to use mindfulness techniques or support our well-being? I'll start with kind of framing that, and it's very, very simple. Employee well-being is linked directly to employee productivity. So if you have a happy, motivated workforce, they do better work, they're happier in work, and that impacts on the client work or whatever work they're producing. So it's very simple. And I think it's really for you, and that's really great that you're recognizing this, and you can put that forward to your company owner and say, look, I really want to do more with wellbeing, and here are the facts linked to increased productivity, because that's something that your managers will be looking out for. And there's stuff that I can send you, research I found, I'm sure Kirsty has as well, which supports that definitely. And if it's good enough for the Apples and Googles and Nikes of the world, then it's good enough for us. I'm sure Kirsty's got some stuff to add.
That's great, Louise. I would say pretty much the same, and model it yourself. Share with people. It's a great time nowadays, and I think a great opportunity to show, in a way, a piece of vulnerability and say, you know, I learned this, I know it, it's helped me. I'd love to help others who work alongside me. Could it be something we can use in our program? Loads of companies nowadays are looking at well-being, and we know, and there are a lot of studies out there that show the importance of bringing well-being into the corporate world more than ever before. It increases productivity. We no longer want to be multitasking and doing 100 things at once. We want to be doing one thing really well. But I would say model it from what you experience yourself. There's no better way of doing it than that.
I don't think we've got any other questions, unless anyone wants to just type something quickly. No, I think that's it. Well, thank you everyone for joining. I really hope you found that useful and you can apply some of these mindfulness techniques to your working day, your COVID-19 day, and your personal time, so you feel kind of the benefits of that in every sense of your life, really. Thank you. You're welcome. Just had a couple of thank yous. And Kirsty, is there anything else you wanted to add as a closing statement?
No, just take a little bit of time for yourselves. Focus on your breath. Honestly, it is more than ever needed. Even the small things you do, put it as something small. It doesn't have to be overwhelming. I hear a lot of clients come and say, you know, I don't have time to do a 45-minute meditation in the morning. I say, you don't have to. You have time to take one good deep breath, to put your hand on your chest and reconnect with yourself. We all have that time. You are so worth it. I don't need to tell you your worth. Develop an action of self-compassion. I think for me and my practice and what I teach my clients is more needed than ever before now. Look at yourselves, look at where you can bring self-compassion into your life, and then you'll be able to share it with others. Yeah, that's all from me, and thank you so much. Thank you to everyone for coming.